Thanks everybody for virtually showing up this morning. Well, hopefully this will all go smoothly, and I'm going to actually switch to screen sharing here in a moment, and my face will, I think, disappear or get smaller. So let me go ahead and do that now. All right. Well, first of all, to reiterate, really want to thank Global Marine Insurance Agency for sponsoring this seminar. They've been great for the last several years, and at least, and sponsoring the in-person event, and now continuing to do that with the online version. So thank you to Global, and thank you to Ranger and Cutwater for having me here today and letting me chat with all of you about the Inside Passage and going cruising. It's something that I'm passionate about and love doing. And as you might be able to tell, I am on my boat now in Friday Harbor. A little foggy this morning, but it's been a beautiful week. If you guys have any questions at all, like Sam said, please ask. We'll pause every once in a while and I'll review questions and answer them for the group. A little bit about me. I've mostly lived aboard for now 6-7 years, a couple of different boats, and quite a bit of that time I haven't had any permanent slip. I like just wandering. I'm fortunate that I'm able to do this with work. I've got a company now called slowboat.com with some partners, and what we do is try to demystify cruising in the Pacific Northwest. We really want to make this seem less scary. We want it to be something that is accessible to most people, almost everybody. Really, it's not something that you have to have a lifetime of experience in order to go up to Desolation Sound. And so we want to make sure that you all are comfortable with how to get there. We also lead flotillas. We have taken Ranger Tugs and Cutwaters on both of these trips. They're more than up to the task of cruising anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. And so don't let the boat be the limiting factor in where you cruise. I like to start these presentations. I'm going to go ahead and pause my video here. I like to start these presentations with kind of the pretty pictures of why we go out cruising. So this first one, sunset somewhere in the Gulf Islands. I think that was Montague Harbor, maybe. There's nothing quite like sitting on your boat or sitting on the beach that you've boated to, cold drink and a beautiful sunset. This is James Island in the San Juan Islands, so not far from a lot of us. You can see Mount Baker in the background. If you haven't been to these state marine parks yet, or the Canadian equivalent, the provincial marine parks in BC, highly recommend visiting some of those this summer. They're a wonderful resource. As far as I know, they're still open. We were just at some of them this last week, and great hiking. A lot of them have docks or mooring buoys you can tie up to, in addition to places to anchor. So a real gem, a great resource, and you can buy, if you're going to be using these a lot, for about $5 per foot per year. You can buy an annual pass, so you can tie up to buoys and docks as much as you'd like for a whole year for not very much money. This is a winter trip up to Princess Louisa Inlet. Beautiful scenery. I hope some of you have been to Princess Louisa, and if not, it should go on your list. It's one of the most beautiful places in the Pacific Northwest. Chatterbox Falls, you might have heard of. It's at the end of Princess Louisa Inlet. Malibu Camp is a large summer camp that's there. Stunning spot, and well worth the kind of long haul up there. This is Desolation Sound. Not the sunniest day up there, but there is a lot of sunshine in Desolation Sound in the summer. Typically the water rather gets warm. It's one of the wonderful things about cruising in Desolation is being able to swim comfortably off your boat. Here's more Desolation Sound. And this is another Desolation Sound shot. Beautiful scenery up there. It's really amazing when you come around Sarah Point into Desolation. The mountains kind of open up, and it's quite a sight. This is Prudhoe Haven, which is probably the quintessential and one of the most popular Desolation Sound anchorages. And you can see why. Just incredible scenery, calm water, lots of room. This is another one of the fun parts of cruising, the happy hours and dinghy trips. This was on a flotilla trip. This couple was coming over for the happy hour, and one of the fun parts of cruising is the social side of it, and of course the wildlife, whales, Bears, by the time you get up to Desolation Sound, occasionally you'll see a bear on shore. Definitely north of Desolation, you'll see bears, porpoises, all sorts of sea life. So the whales in particular, though, are a real treat. And we talked about question and answer in here. You can use the Q&A feature in Zoom. Also feel free, if you're having trouble with that, to shoot me an email directly. I've got another screen up with emails here. So sam@slowboat.com. The questions that really add to the presentation. So make sure if you have any questions at all, there are no dumb questions. So go ahead and ask, and we'll do our best to get these answered sometime today. I always like to start these presentations with asking the audience, what are you worried about? And we can't really do this in the traditional way today, but if you have things that you're worried about right now, go ahead and ask. Here are some of the common things that people are worried about. Rough water and storms. A big one is waking up where they didn't anchor. That can be a bit disconcerting, but thankfully doesn't happen with any regularity. People get worried about hitting rocks, and thankfully our charts are good. Fog, like I'm experiencing this morning in Friday Harbor. That is one of the things that concerns people. The toilet breaking, a big problem for a lot of boats. Anything else breaking, less of a problem. Most of these are things that we'll touch on today and work for strategies on how to deal with managing these and whether or not they should be concerns or not. Something to think about, and a book that's excellent if you're preparing to head up to Desolation Sound, is called The Curve of Time. And this is the story of a woman who went cruising, a single mom, 5 kids in the 20s on a 25-foot wooden boat. And she spent a whole bunch of time cruising in Desolation Sound and wrote a book about it. The book is still available, and highly recommend getting this book, reading about this story, because if you're worried about this, reading about the lack of information, the lack of good charts, the lack of electronics, and that she was out there doing it in the 20s will inspire you, hopefully, to get out there and go cruising. I see, I'm going to answer this question live. So I just saw a question about docking, worried about docking, and that's a great fear to have. Nobody is born knowing how to dock a boat, and so don't be too worried if you're anxious about this. My advice: approach slowly. Don't go any faster than you're willing to hit the dock. Don't be afraid to do it again, especially when there are people watching you. There's a temptation to rush and to try to get it done with. Don't give in to that pressure. Dock on your own schedule, not somebody else's. And don't be afraid if you have to do 3 or 4 or 5 different attempts. Similarly, don't be scared if you have to tell the marina that you can't get into the slip, or you need a different slip because the way the wind's blowing or the current's blowing. And don't be afraid to wait. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to go anchor somewhere and wait, or drive around for a little while and wait for the wind to die. So I hope that helps a little bit. The best thing you can do then is practice, practice, practice. And that might be throwing a buoy in the water and a fender in the water and just practice pulling up next to that. You're obviously not going to do any damage to the boat pulling up to a fender. And so that's a good way to just get a feel for how the boat moves in the water and how it responds to control inputs. So I hope that answered the question. We'll get back to the question about the land border restrictions here in a little bit. Here's another slide I like, because these 2 boats are going the same place. The boat on the right is about 400 feet long. The boat on the left is a paddleboard, and both of them are heading up to Alaska. The person on the left was actually doing it on a paddleboard without a paddle. It was a remarkable effort. He didn't make it, but he was okay. It was part of the race to Alaska. But the point of this is the boat, your boats are all very capable of cruising anywhere you want to go in the Pacific Northwest, and quite comfortably too. So don't worry that you don't have necessarily a large yacht with 4 staterooms and 2 water makers and whatever else. Ranger tugs will go everywhere the bigger boats will go. Cutwaters will go everywhere the bigger boats will go, often a lot faster with a lot less trouble, and you'll fit into the marinas that the bigger guys are not able to go to. So I think they're really an ideal sized boat. The speed's really nice to have, and the boat will not limit you from cruising anywhere you want to cruise in the Pacific Northwest. So a lot of you will be heading north on a sponsored trip, a group trip. And so some of the planning is done for you the first several days of the trip. But after you get up to Desolation Sound, you got to figure out the planning for the rest of your summer or the rest of your trip, and how you're going to spend your time in Desolation Sound, how you're going to get home from Desolation Sound, what you're going to see while you're up there, how long to spend. And so we're going to talk about a lot of different things related to this. We're talking about destinations to visit, some of the logistics behind the trip, and some of the trip planning information. So what I like to talk about first is you get up to Gorge Harbor and you're planning the rest of your trip. And how do you do that? I start with a spreadsheet where I go through kind of the knowns. When I know I need to fill up with water, when I know I need to fill up with fuel, when I know I need fresh food, things like that. And so plan around your knowns and your limiting factors. So make sure you're saying maybe every 4 days I need to go into a marina. These are the marinas that I want to visit. So I like to just get those on the spreadsheet. And then I go back and I fill in the days in between with anchorages or other marinas that may not have the services I need that make sense for the route between the first marina and the second marina, and so forth. I also like to make sure to plan for days off. Nobody wants to go on vacation and have every day so fully scheduled that there's no time for relaxation or spontaneity. So make sure you're planning for days off. And it's really important on a boat to plan for weather days as well. And so weather days and your days off can often be the same. And so make sure on maybe once a week, so maybe plan for every week you're gone, plan 6 days and have a day that is a flexible day. That could be just a sit and enjoy the anchorage an extra day. It could be, oh, we couldn't go today because of the weather. Oh, we wanted to go and do this side trip. Whatever it may be, having that flexibility built into the schedule is really, really important. It's also important to ask questions. Your fellow cruisers, or the coconut telegraph, as they say in cruiser world, is really important for learning what the best destinations are, what places have what services. Oh, this marina is, they're whatever is broken this week, or this farmer's market just opened up at this place. So asking fellow cruisers, it's normally a very social activity. People are happy to share information and what they've learned. The tug nuts are an incredible resource that you guys all have. A lot of people on tug nuts are experienced cruisers in these areas and can give you information on favorite destinations or must-see places to avoid, and so forth. So ask questions and people will hopefully answer. So charts and guidebooks for the trip up to Desolation Sound. I don't think there's any need to carry a complete set of paper charts. This is debated frequently, and there's some confusing language in the Canadian regulations. I've spoken with the Canadian Office of Boating Safety, and they've assured me that recreational boats are not required to carry the complete set of paper charts. Paper charts really are waning in importance. The US will no longer publish them pretty soon here. And so the Canadian requirement is that you must have the paper charts or sufficient local knowledge. And that the reality is for pleasure boats, sufficient local knowledge is cruising guides and good electronic charts on your chart plotter, on your phones, tablets, etc. That said, if you're more comfortable having paper charts aboard, by all means carry them. And Fine Edge publishes some really helpful planning maps for the Inside Passage and Desolation Sound that I find indispensable. I saw Jeff Mesmer had one behind him this morning in his office at home, it looked like. And those can be really helpful for showing you the big picture. And so your chart plotter and your iPad and whatnot can be helpful for going through the detailed stuff, but it can be hard to get the bigger picture with the electronic charts. So I do like those large planning maps. The next thing we have here is the Wagner Guide and Ports and Passes. Those are the two most important guidebooks for the trip. The Wagner Guide is updated every year, so it has has information on fuel docks and services in marinas. These marinas and fuel docks do change somewhat from year to year. It's a pretty small business up there, and so they sometimes close down or new ones open up. If you want to get some more books to add to your list, I think the Dream Speaker books are good, and the Douglas Exploring series are excellent. They're really geared towards anchorages. The Dream Speaker books are nice to look at because they're really pretty and have good watercolor drawings. And Active Captain, that's built into your chart plotters now. Garmin owns them. It's also available electronically. And so Active Captain is basically a Yelp or TripAdvisor type thing for the water. And so that's another great resource. And you can also contribute to that if you'd like. People often ask about pets on board, and pets are of course welcome in Canada. Many people cruise with dogs and cats on board. A few people with stranger animals. We've had people with birds. Haven't had any snakes yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are snake cruisers out there. But pets are not a problem going across the border. There are a couple of things that become challenging. One is keep your pet food in its original packaging. And we're going to talk more about the customs restrictions on food and other things in a little bit, but make sure that that you keep your pet food in its original packaging. And that's so that the Canadian or the US border officials, as you cross the border, can look at the ingredients in there and make sure that there aren't prohibited ingredients. We haven't had big problems with pet food ingredients in recent years, but it could become a problem at some point. I know with Mad Cow in the past, it was occasionally problematic taking certain types of pet food across. A dinghy also becomes more important if you're cruising with a dog that needs to get to shore regularly, or you need to make sure that you're stopping at marinas and that have docks, or state parks or provincial parks that have docks. And a dinghy that's easy to launch is important. Make sure if you've got a pet on board that you're planning stops on some of your longer cruising days. Some of these days can drag on, and you want to make sure that your dog can get to shore. Another thing is marinas don't like it when you come in, you take up a spot for a few hours, and then you leave without paying anything, and you just walked your dog on their property and gone on your way. So if you are going to tie up at a private marina, make sure that you call ahead and ask permission on the radio, and then tie up where they'd like and offer to pay for the privilege of tying up there and walking your dog. As you move north in the Gulf Islands, there's no bear issue, but as you move north into Desolation Sound, and if you head north of Desolation Sound, you should be bear aware as you're going to shore as well. And so I recommend carrying bear spray and making noise. Bear spray, if it's labeled as bear spray, not mace or anything for people. So the stuff that is clearly labeled bear spray is allowed across the Canadian border. You should declare that as you go across, but no problem taking bear spray across. So safety gear, and none of us want to think about safety gear, but it is important to have it with us in case the worst happened. And what we should be doing is being super careful and avoiding the need for this altogether. But if we do that, bad things can still occasionally happen. And so one thing to think about is that the Coast Guard requirements, they're slightly different between the US and Canada, but if you're a US boat traveling in Canada or a Canadian boat traveling in the US, you are held to the standards of your home country, not the country that you're traveling in. So don't worry if you're if you're compliant with the US and you're a US boat and you're in Canada and you don't have the reboarding device requirement or the whatever it is. Don't worry about that. They'll honor the US Coast Guard requirements. I think a personal locator beacon is a good idea. This is a few $100s, and in a Mayday situation, this basically says where you are and vectors in emergency responders so they can find you. I think that, and we may hear more from the insurance people about this, but consider towing insurance. Most insurance policies have towing insurance included, but you have to pay for it first, and then they reimburse you. Make sure you understand your own situation with that. If you did need a tow in, who would pay for that and how that would happen. I am a big believer in life jackets and in dinghies wearing that kill switch, that little red cord that comes off the outboard. A couple years ago, I tossed myself out of my dinghy at a high rate of speed, and I was really fortunate to be wearing both a life jacket and a kill switch. And so please wear those when you're working on deck or driving around in your dinghy. And think about a man overboard situation. These are probably the most common, one of the most common types of emergencies that we experience on board. And so think about how, if you or your spouse or your child or whoever, or your pet went overboard, how you would get that person back in on the boat. So in terms of medical first aid stuff, and we'll circle back at the end of this segment and we'll go through questions for this. In terms of medical and first aid stuff, make sure you bring a supply of your normal prescriptions for the duration of your trip. That's important because of the Canadian pharmacies won't typically fill prescriptions from US doctors and vice versa. And so you might just want to bring plenty of extra medication so that you have enough of your prescriptions on board for the whole trip. I like carrying one of these expedition style first aid kits. They're available at REI or Fishery Supply or West Marine, something that's a little bit beefed up compared to what you might carry in the trunk of your car. If you're going to be in fairly remote areas, I mean, these areas aren't so remote that you can't get help quickly if there's a real emergency, if there's a cardiac event or something like that. But you want to be able to deal with most things, hopefully on your own without calling for help. And so having a good first aid kit where you can splint something or put second skin on a more serious burn or scald is good to have. But I don't want to scare you here. We're not crossing oceans. We're not even traveling up as far as Alaska or something like that. You can be to help fairly quickly, and in a real emergency, the Canadian Coast Guard and the US Coast Guard is excellent in terms of pulling people off boats and assisting in emergency situations. So provisioning. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. We've dealt with most of the less fun logistics. Provisioning is just a fancy boat word for getting groceries and other supplies. And a couple of tips here. Garbage can become problematic as you head north. And so make sure you're getting rid of packaging as much as you can on your way home from the grocery store before the food goes onto the boat. Something like this rice pilaf mix, there's probably, it's mostly air in that box, but it takes up a lot of room on the boat and you have to then dispose of the box. So a lot of people will dump this into a Ziploc bag and then throw away the cardboard. It's important if you do that you mark what is there. And so you might cut out the instructions so that you can just put that in the Ziploc bag as well, so that you know how to make it. And also, what is in the Ziploc bag. Some people find it's helpful to outline meals in advance and think about what you're going to have at your disposal. Some of the time you're going to be anchored out and you're going to have relatively little electricity. And so maybe that Instant Pot that uses 1500 watts at home is not the best tool for cooking on the boat. Things like that. We find that boat ovens generally are not nearly as well insulated and boat spaces are smaller. So in the summer, baking inside can just throw too much heat out into the boat and make it kind of uncomfortable. So think about that as you're planning your meals. You may not want to be doing as much baking as you can. The flip side, the barbecue is used all the time in the summer on my boat. It's really nice to be cooking outdoors, keep the smells outside, keep the heat outside, and be cooking out where you have a nice view and you're enjoying the sunshine. Also keep in mind that food's never far away. There are restaurants up through Desolation Sound at a lot of these marinas or near the marinas. There are stores at a lot of the marinas with some food. There's supermarkets all along the way in the more major communities. So food may be a little different than you're used to. It might be a little more expensive. There might be a little less produce or different produce than you want. But there is food available all along this trip. So you don't need to leave home with enough food for 2, 3, 4 weeks. You'll be able to restock along the way. I'm going to pause here and pull up my questions quickly and see if there are any questions that people have so far. One, can we get a copy of this PowerPoint presentation? Yes, we will make that available afterwards. Somebody else asked, is an Instant Pot okay on the dock with shore power? And yes, you just have to make sure that you're not using a whole bunch of other stuff on the boat, typically. So an Instant Pot, if you're on a normal 30 amp shore power connection, the Instant Pot uses, if it's a normal size Instant Pot, it's going to use maybe a third of your available shore power. So just keep that in mind, that you don't want to be doing that and a space heater and the water heater. I'm going to save the other questions for later, and we'll keep going on this one, but we'll put these in the queue and get to them before the day is through. Next, thoughts with provisioning. Drinks can take up a lot of room and be very heavy. What we do aboard my boat is a soda stream, and that makes it so a lot of the fizzy waters and tonics and so forth, rather than having to carry cans and deal with garbage from all that and the weight of having it all aboard the boat, we just use tank water and put it in there and make fizzy water or tonic or whatever we need. Think about your coffee maker and how you're going to make coffee in the morning. If you're going to rely on the generator or electricity, are you going to be able to do that away from the dock? And so maybe a French press and boiling water on the propane cooktop is a better idea. I have been carrying an extra ice chest just for drinks, for beer and other drinks that we don't make in the soda stream. I find the ice chest serves a couple purposes. One, it keeps the refrigerator from being open constantly as people are reaching for a drink. And so that keeps the power consumption to a minimum, allows more space in the fridge for perishables and other things that don't live in a cooler as well. A lot of people will carry an extra chest fridge or freezer. They make these that just plug into a 12-volt outlet. I've seen them in the cave on some of the Rangers and Cutwaters. I've seen them in the engine compartment on some. That seems like it would be a warmer issue for the compressor would have to work hard. But there is room on a lot of these boats to carry an extra freezer. So happy hour is a big deal among cruisers. And so we find that people often provision like they're eating at home, but they don't have enough of the snacks and other things that you'd bring to a group happy hour. And so the way these happy hours typically work is when you're tied up at a marina, there's often a 4:30 or 5 o'clock rolls around and everybody brings their folding chairs out onto the dock and they bring food to share, their own drink, and just hang out. You talk about where you've been, where you're going. You talk about boats a lot. People will often branch off and go back and get a tour of somebody's boat. It's pretty fun, and it's an important part of cruising. Couple tips for this. Make sure you have lots of snack food that's easy to whip up something. Some people get really competitive in this, and they'll bring fresh king salmon they've just caught. They'll bring custom pizzas. I mean, you don't have to be that serious. I tend to be a whole lot less serious about that. Chips and salsa are plenty good. So don't worry if you're not into cooking elaborate meals on your boat. Another tip is have a boat card, and this is just like a business card for your boat. It will typically have your names, your boat name, maybe a picture of your boat, picture of you, email addresses, phone numbers, that kind of thing, so that people can get in touch with you and stay in touch as you go cruising through the summer. It may also have your MMSI number if you're broadcasting AIS so that other boats can see you. Some marinas host this formally, other marinas it's just kind of an informal thing. And during the group cruises, whether you're on a flotilla trip with one of the outfits doing that like us or somebody else, or on one of the Ranger Cutwater sponsored trips, happy hour is a big deal. In terms of spare parts, some people get really worked up about this. My experience has been most of the Ranger Cutwaters are fairly new, well-built boats that have relatively few problems. So I think the spare parts should be focused more on wear items. Make sure obviously your boat is well maintained and you've done all the preventative servicing that is recommended. But then the kind of the minimum spare parts, and this is going to vary boat by boat, and talk with Ranger and Cutwater specifically for your vessel. But having some spare fuel filters, a little bit of spare engine oil and coolant for the diesel powered boats or inboard powered boats, just to top off if there's a leak anywhere. Having a spare belt on board, an impeller for your main engine if it's an inboard engine, particularly because you can change that fairly easily. Fuses for everything on board. A patch kit for the dinghy is really important. You're going to be going on shore hopefully, and some of these landings are a little rocky or barnacly or muscly, and they tend to sometimes they can pop dinghies, but those are normally pretty easily patched. And a thruster shear pin kit. Shear pin is a good thing to have. We see those fail every once in a while, but pretty basic spare parts list. We aren't going crazy here. You don't need to be carrying starters or alternators or anything like that. There are services available all along the way. If you need anything, you can get mechanical help. You can get parts shipped in or whatever. So don't worry too much about the boat. If you're going to be going out longer, if you're going up to the Broughtons or further north, and or you really don't want your cruise interrupted because of a problem, you might consider things like a rebuild kit for the head, a spare fresh water pump, things that would they may not ruin, they might not be a disaster, but they would make you divert in to a port somewhere to get parts. I think a few parts for the dinghy are good too. A propeller, a spare pull cord, spark plugs perhaps. Spark plugs on if you've had old outboards, they used to foul plugs all the time. These new outboards are so good, the four strokes, that we don't see spark plug problems like the old days much. Remember, Desolation Sound isn't that remote. You can get help while you're there in Campbell River and Lund and Powell River. Other cruisers are good sources of help. Ranger Cutwater does an excellent job of supporting owners by phone, email, however they can. And if you're a US citizen and you're traveling in Canada, or a Canadian traveling in the US, it's easiest to find a local supplier for parts if you need things. And that's because parts don't necessarily travel smoothly across the border. They can get held up in customs. And so make sure that you find a local supplier if you can for any parts as you're cruising in a foreign country. So a little bit about clothing for this trip. You need to be ready for a whole bunch of different weather. It's not uncommon for mornings, especially late summer, to be cooler, maybe a little bit of fog. Sometimes you even get rain. And so be prepared for that. In the morning, if you're going to shore to take the dog out, for instance, there's often a kind of a heavy layer of dew on the dinghy or in the kayak. And so you may want to have some waterproof pants. I use rain pants quite a bit. And having layers, so it's a lot of times it'll start out cool and cloudy, and by early afternoon it'll be sunny, and by late afternoon it'll be 85 and sunny. And so you might, in a long kayak or dinghy trip, you might experience a whole bunch of different weather or a hike. And so make sure you're prepared for all that. You don't need to have formal clothes with you. I don't carry a tie on board and have yet to need one, thankfully. But think about having heavy fabrics. Cotton is not necessarily the best option because it takes a long time to dry. A lot of synthetics tend to get stinky quickly. So most marinas have laundry. The Wagner Guide is a great source of information on what marinas have laundry and what marinas have water and all that kind of stuff. So make sure that you've got clothing that's relatively easy to wash. I found that merino wool is great. You can wash it, even hand washing it works well. And and then they dry quickly as well. Having, the other thing to think about is having enough clothing that you're not running to you're not running constantly to the laundromat to do laundry. So if you might be able to carry a few weeks worth of clothing with you and then just save up the laundry for when you get back home. So I do see a question here about the Boat US MMSI. The short answer is in the United States, you can get an MMSI from Boat US, which they say is only good if you're traveling within the US, or you can get an MMSI through the FCC for international voyages. If you already have a Boat US MMSI, I would not worry about it. Just go to Canada, be happy. If you are on the fence about which one to get, I would recommend trying to go through the FCC process. The website for that is much more challenging than the Boat US website, and it costs money. And I believe the Boat US one is free. We've heard of no problems with people having Boat US MMSI numbers in Canada. If you're a real by the book kind of person, you might have and you're doing this now, go ahead and do the FCC process, but don't worry if you already have a Boat US MMSI. What I'm told is if you use that little distress button on your VHF with a Boat US MMSI when you're in Canada, the distress message still goes out like normal. The only difference is they don't have the database information, so they don't have your boat name, but the distress signal still goes out like usual. So I'm going to pause for just a moment here, and I think Holly from Global is going to get in here.
Did that work? Hold on. Here we go.
Hey, Holly.
It's a challenge. Good morning. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good. Just wanted to pop in and out. I'm actually at home with an 8-year-old and a bored 50-year-old, so my apologies if somebody comes in and out. Just wanted to thank everybody for logging in. Usually you see Greg and I in the back of the room as all of this is going on, and you can pop by and say hi and answer some questions. If you've got questions, shoot them to me. I'm going to be in and out from the computer, but I will get all that stuff answered if you've got questions regarding policies and coverages and all of that. And you also can shoot me a text message or an email or give me a call. I can provide my information if you have any additional questions that I can do sideline of this. But with that, I'll just turn it back. Thanks everyone for joining in. I'm glad we got, looks like we got nationwide, so East Coast and West Coast going, and enjoy the show and let us know if you've got any questions. I'll turn that back over to you guys.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks.
I'll put Holly's contact information in the Q&A section here, so you can go through there if you don't have Holly's contact information in Global Marine Insurance.
Perfect. Thanks, Sam and Holly. All right, we're gonna dive back in on this a really fun topic, but something that we must deal with on the water, and that's the sewage discharge. And the reality when you're cruising out the U.S., of course, no sewage discharge at all. Please use a pump out in Washington State. In Canada, if there's a pump out available, please use it. However, there's not always a pump out available, and sometimes you're in Desolation Sound, you can't be 3 miles offshore either. And so if you can't be 3 miles offshore and if there's no pump out available, the best practice is to wait for an ebb tide, for the tide to be dropping, go in the deepest possible water, moving at cruising speed, underway somewhere in the middle of a channel, and that's where you should dump your waste. Please never do it when you're in a marina or an anchorage. You don't want to be around that. It's not very pleasant, especially when people are hoping to swim in the nice warm Desolation Sound waters. So before leaving home, though, it's important to make sure that your macerator is working, because what you don't want to do is get beyond the last pump out, have the holding tank full and not have a way to discharge it. So I'll leave it up to you to figure out how to safely make sure that your macerator is working. And the other tip here with these macerators is make sure they don't run dry. Most of them don't like running dry. They'll do it for a moment and then they'll maybe never work again properly until the impeller is replaced. So you want to make sure that they're always pumping waste. So Cell phones in Canada have gotten a lot better for us, us Americans. Unfortunately, I think it's still expensive for most Canadians who are roaming in the US. But you're going to need to check with your carrier and go through this case by case a little bit, because each plan now, and there's so many old plans that are grandfathered in, differing requirements. And so the most common scenarios now are, which Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T all have, are options that allow you to either a fixed cost, a few dollars a day to use your phone like normal in Canada, no cost, but slower data or a little bit of high-speed data, and then they slow you down for free. There are various options, but make sure you have one that works for you and you've contacted your cell phone provider in advance. I have found that T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T all work equally well in Canada, assuming you're willing to pay whatever they charge. And the reason they all work equally well is because they're all roaming onto several networks. They'll use either TELUS, Bell, or Rogers, typically, depending on what's available and what's best. And so we tend to get pretty good coverage throughout that whole area up to Desolation Sound. There are pockets, of course, often where you're anchored. You won't get any service, but you'll get service out during the day while you're moving between anchorages or marinas. So we found cell phone service generally really, really good in most of these areas. Wi-Fi at marinas, however, is often terrible. Some of these marinas, especially as you head north, rely on satellite connections for the Wi-Fi, and so that gets gobbled up really quickly by users as they come in and connect up the 16 devices on their boat, and they're all trying to upload photos and download videos and whatever else. So remember that don't expect a lot from marina Wi-Fi, and don't complain to the marina if the Wi-Fi is lousy. That has happened quite a bit for the last several years, and the result is that marinas are just taking away Wi-Fi rather than making it better. It's easier for them to say, if we can't make it good, we'll just take it away, and that way we don't have to hear clients complain about it. One thing that has really, really helped on my boat is a cell phone booster, and I'm using a Wilson WeBoost booster. I've used several of their options for a bunch of years now and found them really effective. I was just up at Stewart Island the other night, barely got a bar, sometimes got no bars on my cell phone ordinarily. I put it up next to the booster and I've got 4 bars. So they really do work. It's important that you have it installed correctly or install it correctly, and by that you need to have the internal antenna and the external antenna sufficiently far apart, and the internal antenna needs to be really close to your phone or a hotspot or tablet or whatever you're boosting, like next to. So don't think that this booster is going to improve the signal across your whole boat. It's going to work really well right up close, but if you walk to the other side of the boat, it might not boost the signal anymore. But highly effective in certain instances. And if you need to be connected for work, you're worried about things at home, whatever it is that you need to be connected, you just are really serious about social media, make sure that you have a booster on board. I would not spend money on a Wi-Fi booster, however, because as good as you can make that signal between you and the marina Wi-Fi, the problem typically is the connection the marina has to the internet, and it's just not good enough for fast, normal internet. People often ask about currency in Canada, and right now the US dollar is actually pretty strong. A couple of years ago it was par, and so Canadians would love it if you would spend our dollars, US dollars, at par in Canada, but just don't. Make sure you get a little bit of Canadian currency. We have found that there's large amounts of cash are not required. It's helpful to have some small bills and some local currency, enough for the $20 here and there for a public dock, and those tend to be, there often are no harbor masters at those places, so you've got to drop exact change in. So it's nice to have small bills, and it's nice to have Canadian currency for that. It's good to have loonies, and loonies are the Canadian dollar coins pictured here. Those are good for showers and laundry. Please don't put US quarters in the Canadian machines, and don't put Canadian currency in the US machines. That breaks the machine for everybody. But at private marinas, fuel docks, grocery stores, restaurants, credit cards are widely accepted and often the preferred method of payment. You might look and make sure that your credit card doesn't charge a foreign transaction fee, or that you can live with the foreign transaction fee if they do charge it. A lot of credit cards, that's 3% or so. But many credit cards have no foreign transaction fee now. And a number of banks also refund ATM fees. So ATMs are also available in larger towns, and so you can get cash there. We'll talk about this as kind of a little bit later as we go through customs information, because I like to I think it makes it easiest if you just don't worry about the Canadian currency, you don't worry about the perhaps prohibited food items. You do all that, you just stop somewhere your first day in Canada, get your currency, get your food, and then go on your vacation. I did just see a question about the WeBoost for the marine environment, or does the one for the RV or truck or home work? And you don't need to buy the marine specific one. You can buy any of the models. They work equally well on the water or in a car. But I do buy the WeBoost Wilson marine external antenna. It's about $100. And it's a good antenna, and it also is stainless, so it doesn't rust. It screws into a marine antenna mount, that sort of thing. Most of us now have smartphones and tablets aboard, and they're really useful. They're great tools for us. The Navionics app is awesome. I highly recommend everybody download that on your phone and your tablet, and any other iDevices or Android devices that you have. Navionics does Active Captain, which is a crowdsourced cruising guide. It does auto routing, which is an incredible way to plan your trips just for a quick and dirty version of the route to see, okay, is it practical from here to there today? How long is that going to take me? You guys mostly probably have the auto routing function on your main Garmin navigation systems as well. And the Navionics app on your phone or tablet is a great backup as well, in case something were to happen to your main Garmin unit. Have any of you used windy.com? If not, you might try going to windy.com right now in another tab on your computer and just leaving it open to review later. It's an awesome weather website. It's become my go-to source for weather information. I don't ignore anything from the official government forecasters either, but I find that Windy is so much more detailed. It gives a much more granular look in terms of the timing and specific locations of weather that I just find it indispensable for cruising these days. Marine Traffic is kind of a fun website. It allows you to see your online where AIS targets are. It's not perfect though, and don't use this for navigation. I've seen things that are 20, 30 or more minutes out of date, and so you don't want to be making a navigation decision based on where the Victoria Clipper or a Washington State ferry was 30 minutes ago. So make sure for AIS you want to rely on the AIS that's actually aboard your boat. Sometimes calculating the time of slack can be a real hassle. Like, if it's at 10:32 a.m. You know, and I need to travel an hour and 37 minutes to get there, what time do I need to leave? And that's a little bit of a challenge for math. You know, doing it on a normal calculator. There's some hours and minutes, some time calculators available for online, and so those are great. I just saw that that Bruce mentioned PredictWind as another weather app, and yes, PredictWind is excellent as well. It's similar to Windy. I find that the PredictWind colors are a little scarier looking, but they have several models you can choose from, like Windy and maps that have great animations for showing the weather and winds. We'll talk about this app extensively at the end of the day, but the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol now has an app for clearing customs called Roam. Don't ask me what it stands for, but it works brilliantly, and I would be really hesitant to clear customs any other way now that I've used Roam. So we'll talk about that later on. And then a couple of things, using your iThings underway. If you're using like Navionics or anything else that's using the GPS chip in your tablet, it uses a lot of power. And so make sure you have a high output charger to keep your device charged as you're using it on board. You'll also have the screen brightness cranked all the way up probably, so you can see the screen well. And then think about a mount so that your tablet doesn't go flying across the boat and either injure somebody or break the tablet when there's a big wake that comes. I like RAM mounts. They're a local Seattle company. They are infinitely configurable and adjustable, and they make a lot of good options, but there are other companies as well. We use iThings underway all the time, and they're super helpful and useful, and I highly recommend them.